Paranormal King Radio Network, bringing you the best paranormal hosts and guests, bringing you the best paranormal shows and features, playing the top musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. With the best paranormal hosts and guests. The best in paranormal shows and features. Playing the best musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. The paranormal will never be the same.
You are listening to Paranormalities and Ponderings with the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team. Brought to you by the Paranormal King Radio Network and hosted by Frank Lee. Join us for the next hour as we discuss ghosts, spirits, hauntings, and otherworldly phenomena that has yet to be explained in hopes of finding answers. This show is meant to be a resource for those of you who, like us, seek to find answers to the unknown. We hope you find it informative and enjoy the show. And once again, thank you for listening.
Welcome to Paranormalities and Ponderings. I'm your host, Frank Lee. Thank you for tuning in tonight. We've got a great show in store for you. I have with me tonight Kat Hobson, our host on the network of Paranormal Experienced, and she's going to be talking with me tonight. Unfortunately, we had some extenuating circumstances come up, so our scheduled guests weren't able to make it, but we are rescheduling with them for sometime next month. But in the meantime, we're going to be talking about all kinds of neat paranormal things tonight that you'll enjoy. So without further ado, Kat, how are you tonight?
I am doing well, thank you. I appreciate you getting me in.
No problem. I appreciate you coming on the show, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you. And of course, I always enjoy listening to your show on Wednesday nights. So
thank you. I enjoy it too. I love getting the guests in. Just like you, I always learn new things, and I really hate that my friend Marie Jones wasn't able to come tomorrow night. She has the same stuff apparently everyone across the country has. It's the flu that turns into something else. Mm-hmm. But she will be joining us again in a few weeks, and I have Tanya coming in to stay. She's awesome. So coming in to be with me. And she's going to come stay for a while. But I'm very excited. Her team is Expedition Unknown out of Memphis. And she is actually in a competition right now. She's one of 4 finalists to be on the web-based series Hunt This. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested to hear about her experiences and also about how she decided to do that. So, enough about that. Sorry. A little overboard.
Well, you mentioning her being out of Memphis, I can imagine she stays quite busy if having a paranormal team there, because I've been to Memphis quite a few times. Actually spent some time not too far outside of Memphis in a little town called Millington. And that area is very, very active. I think there's more houses in Memphis that are haunted than not haunted.
Well, I know that her partner in crime with the Expedition Unknown is Stephen, and he sits, I believe, on the board of the Fontaine House there,
Hmm.
which is an extraordinarily active location.
Wow.
And I was on their show a couple of weeks ago, and it's always fascinating to me to hear the different things that they have coming up and the different people that they work with through that.
Wow.
They've been doing their show for a long time, and they've been a team for a long time. They actually came to Birmingham to the Phoenix Festival. That's where we met.
Hmm.
We had done a panel together, Scare and Expedition Unknown, and it was just, they're just fun, and they're vivacious, and they're knowledgeable and experienced, and they love sharing what they do, so that makes them fun to be around.
Absolutely, and that does make quite a difference. Is when you have someone that loves to share what they know, and they've got that positive attitude. They're up for helping others, and that's all the difference in the world right there.
It is, because people people get into this, and they get so involved in the experience that sometimes they forget to take people along with them.
Hmm.
And it's intimidating if you don't know what you're doing to try to figure out what's the best equipment, or where should I go to try this on for size. And it's always good to have a mentor.
Absolutely. And let me adjust your volume just a little bit to see it.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking at that. It's very low that people say they can't hear. Very rare that people say they can't hear me. That is not a normal thing. But it could be because I'm still getting over my little bit of that group that Marie is sharing. I think all the world has this.
Let's see. I'm working on making a few adjustments here.
It's okay.
Okay, let's try that out now.
Okay.
How's that sound?
Well, I'm sure somebody will say in chat that things are funky or things are good. I love having the chat.
Oh
I
yes,
love the interaction.
yes. That's definitely. Okay, I believe we got that taken care of.
Yay.
So good deal. So yes, the chat room is awesome because, and to anyone listening, if you haven't been in the chat yet, I definitely recommend it because it's not only is it a great way to send questions to the host and guests, not only for me but for anyone on the network, but some of the subjects that get brought up in the chat room that don't make it to the show get to be interesting as well. So that's always a great thing to check out. Um, I I was going to ask you about some of the events that you might know of going on around the area.
Oh my gosh, there is so much happening right now. Because everybody's been kind of on hiatus for the
Hmm.
holidays, even with the residential investigations, unless it was a crisis scenario.
Hmm.
And of course, we observe the anonymity of those. But I do know that I am going down to Florida, outside of St. Augustine, and I'm also going. I'm so excited about this, for the very first time to Savannah, to Moon River Brewery.
Wow.
And I've always heard about it. The honey hubby and I have always talked about wanting to go to Savannah. Me more than him, because he is so not into ghost hunting or paranormal anything, except for me. And
Right.
it's something that I have always wanted to do. And I'm fortunate enough to be involved with a group that puts these investigations together. And I love it. Can I give them a shout out?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's Chad Morin and the Ghost Hunt Weekends. I
Hmm.
know that people will say, "Oh, well, I would never pay to investigate a location or something of that nature," but there are places that the average bear just cannot get into. Access is hard.
Right.
And, they recently did the Titanic exhibit in Gatlinburg. They had full access. They had a
Hmm.
white tie dinner
Hmm.
and got to be around all the artifacts and everything. And it's nice to be able to have a group that gets that kind of access to something that's so amazing.
Absolutely. That is something that a lot of people don't think about. Is compared to the cost of a lot of a lot of the things that you would do. It's relatively cheap to go with something like that because you're looking at a weekend event and
Yes.
you're going places that the general public's not going to be allowed to go. And they do the dinners and different events. They bring in speakers, and I mean, there's so much to it. It's not just you paying to walk through the location and walk out. So,
Exactly. And, there are people there, they sometimes will have celebrities with them, but not always. And it's really great because you get people that are not trained investigators can get some training. They can be where they can have the equipment demonstrated. Um, they can talk to um, Adam Berry is going to be in Savannah. They can talk to him about having gone through Ghost Hunters University
hmm.
and all the things like that. There's different things to look at, and my team actually, Scare of Alabama, is getting ready to hit the ground running. We have several investigations lined up, and um, my founder right now is actually writing a book again,
Right? I,
another book.
hmm.
She is so, I don't know how she does everything she does. She's brilliant. But the book that she's working on currently is Haunted Talladega County, which is an
Hmm.
area in Alabama. Um, she had already written Haunted Shelby County, and which has gone gangbusters. It's just wonderful. And it is, it's just my color Kool-Aid. Somebody said Meryl needs to investigate. Kara, who is Meryl when you get a chance? But that's my other name.
Oh.
I was just being nosy. But anyway, there's stuff going on everywhere, and I
Hmm.
think that there's been such a burst of activity lately. There's all kinds of different philosophies about why that's happening.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, you know me. I tend to stick more toward the scientific side of the house, of course, and but no, I do have some beliefs as well um, that maybe aren't quite as scientific. One thing I believe is affecting it is if you look at the weather patterns over the past several years, and I know everybody's thinking, "Oh God, we better get out our notebooks and calculators." I promise I'm not going to go that deep. Um,
I had my notebook and I found my pen, so we're good.
oh well, in that case, um, I I will say that studying the weather patterns over the past few years, there's no doubt that the way the weather changes does affect you've got changes in your atmospheric pressures, you've got changes in the charges from your ions that are in the atmosphere, you have the way that it affects um, you have the way that it affects your geomagnetic field, and you have also look at the lunar activity just over the past 2 years. We've had
Yes.
all of the blood moons. There's so many lunar events that are so rare that have happened all in such a short timeline, and all philosophical, religious, everything of that nature to the side. Lunar activity, directly affects the Earth and quite substantially. Anytime there's that pressure created from the gravitational pull, from the lunar gravitational pull changing and fluctuating so much to such a degree during these strange lunar cycles, that is naturally going to cause some type of reaction in the, in your magnetic fields and everything else. And the, that's just, you can't avoid that. I mean, if you look back, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So all of these patterns are going to come with some type of effect, and all of these weather patterns, everything else, are linked to paranormal activity. So you have that to consider. But, in the weather itself that I'd mentioned, if you look at it, we haven't really had distinctive seasons over the past couple of years like we typically would. Like this year, we went straight from summer to winter. We didn't seem to have much of a fall. And if you look back, it was kind of the same way. We went straight out of spring into summer last year. And you have to wonder how that plays into effect. So from the scientific side of the house, I would think that has a lot to do with it. And I'm not, I wouldn't say that's all of it, but I would say that would definitely be a big factor. Now, as far as from a not so scientific perspective,
that's where I was about to go with you. Go ahead.
I'll say look at the interest in the paranormal just over the past 4, 5, 6 years. Just 10 years ago, there weren't quite all that many teams out there. But, and over the past few years, I mean, every day you look and there's a new team popping up somewhere.
Oh my goodness, you can't throw a river rock and not hit one.
Absolutely. And you have all these teams that are coming together. You have so many people that are opening up and being more receptive to paranormal. It's not a taboo subject anymore. It hasn't been 10, 15 years ago that people wouldn't even admit to you if they thought their house was haunted, let alone say, yeah, I want you to come over and check this out. I mean, those were, and if you look at it now, most of our paranormal teams, our phones ring off the hook.
Well, it's like, I don't know. It's just so important that people realize that this is a transition. Because, we've talked before about, I'm from the Deep South, and, the things that I can do and have done, oh, honey, we just don't do that.
Right.
And that is completely going by the wayside, and I'm finding it interesting that people are so receptive.
Right.
And so reaching out strongly.
Right, because now you've got all the paranormal TV shows. People are studying. They're studying metaphysics more. They're doing that. They're investigating for themselves. Or I'm not going to say investigate. I'm going to say ghost hunting.
Ghost
so
hunting.
to speak. Yes.
And there is a difference.
Yes. They they're going out and they don't educate themselves. They're kind of going out for a thrill, and I'm not necessarily talking about teams. No. I mean, just as individuals, you see a lot of people. Hey, it's Saturday night. We're bored. Let's go up to the graveyard. Well, nothing's happening, so let's see what we can provoke. And you have more cases of people legend tripping now, and just all kinds of different things like that. And I believe that has a lot to do with it. You have teams that get put together that don't really educate themselves quite like they should, and sometimes get themselves in a predicament because of it. And we've all seen those cases where a team isn't really prepared for a case that they encounter. They haven't really studied much on that subject, and instead of calling for help, they try to wing it. And
Never a good idea.
right, and so they're walking in there blind, and something ends up, they get some kind of attachment. It just makes a bad situation worse. And there's so many things that I believe, like it was mentioned in the chat, there's a lot of doors being opened up, and in that sort of sense. So I think that that's directly related to the increased number of cases that are reported now. So
Do you think? I'm sorry.
oh, I was just going to say, there you have it. You got a non-scientific answer from me.
I can't believe it. I am so stunned by that one single fact. That has just made my night. That I tease because you know that I learned so much from your shows. I love that because I think that's why we work well together.
Mm-hmm.
Is because we are opposites.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fascinated by the scientific side. I'm learning so much so fast about that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that's due to you and the people that you have helped steer me to. But I'm an emoter. I'm an empath. I am more into helping clients get through and find out what's going on emotionally in their homes, and working with spirits that way also. Because I think the strongest thing that I ever heard was a team member from Ghost Hunters centuries and centuries ago said, spirits are people.
Mm-hmm.
They're just a different dimensional person. And you have to be respectful, and you have to understand that they may be freaking out too.
Right.
And I thought, well, I hadn't really gone that way. And it is all about respect. Someone Tristan asked, how do you get activity without provoking? And I don't provoke. I know you don't provoke either.
Right.
Because when you do, you can have so much negativity just slam you in your face,
Mm-hmm.
or your chest or wherever. Tristan, I get activity because I try to be kind, and I try to find out what is going on with the environment that the spirits are in.
Mm-hmm.
And I am an empath. I can feel emotions. I can feel the emotions of spirits, and I can feel the energy of spirits who are there. And I can feel intent. And I just can't bring myself to be provocative to someone who's trying to find help, who may need help crossing over, who doesn't know why they're where they are. And I've come across things that did not have good intent. I still didn't provoke because they do have their own skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
I just talk to them.
Right.
So.
And something I do want to say is, I know just a few minutes ago you had mentioned how much you learned from my show, but that is not one-sided. I have learned so much from listening to you because of the way that you deal with people, the way that you kind of work as a liaison in a sense between any entities that you encounter and the people there. And I mean, you're so great at that. So
Oh, thank you.
So I've picked up quite a few tips from you that really come in handy. But no, as far as getting activity, I do want to say that something I've noticed is one of the best ways I've found to really trigger activity is flood that environment with positive energy. While you're there, go
Yes.
in, be positive, there is nothing wrong with you enjoying yourself while you're on an investigation.
Absolutely.
And what type of energy you put out is what you're going to get back. That just tends to be the case
Yes.
most of the time. So if I'm going to put something out, especially in a case like that, I want it to be something positive. Donald there in the chat room, he's our operations manager and lead investigator. He can tell you from the cases that we've been on. When you go in during an EVP session, and this is something that you know you've got to keep in mind. These are people.
Yes.
If someone comes in, if you break in my living room at midnight,
Great energy. Yes.
right,
Echo.
right, 2, 3 in the morning, and you want to interrogate me, I mean, you're not going to get a good response. So,
Nope.
and especially if you come in trying to provoke me, that's, you know, it would give you a response, sure, but it wouldn't be the response that anyone would want. Well, I believe the same thing applies to spirits as well.
I agree totally.
But now, something I've found is when you go in, sometimes just ask just a crazy, off-the-wall, humorous question.
Yes.
Donald can tell you. One time, we were doing the EVP session, and one of the best responses we got, I asked the questions if ghosts really wear sheets in the afterlife, and the response that we got, I remember the laughter, and I can't remember if it was a straight yes or if it was a sometimes. Donald may remember that one, to clear the record.
I
But
cannot believe you got that response.
but
That's hilarious.
but we did, and we did. We got an EVP of laughter, and it it goes to show. But during that during that same EVP session, what we done was we're all outside, and we're there with the clients. We're sitting around this little campfire that's going, or little fire pit, and there's a little table right there in front. And for the record, then after the laughter, we got a sometimes to the answer about wearing the sheets in the afterlife. So thank you for clearing that up for us, Donald. Um, but we're sitting around, and we've got they've got a container full of coffee out there. Everybody's just sitting around, and we're enjoying ourselves, sitting around the fire, doing an EVP session, just casually, like we're hanging out. And what I did, the clients had been seeing the apparitions outside, so that was where we set up in the area. And I just walk around, I grab an extra chair, and I pull it up to the table where we are. And I go back to doing the EVP session, and I say, hey, if you're here, you're welcome to sit down in this chair and join us. Would you like to come up, have some coffee, and talk with us? And just like that, like I'm talking to anyone else. And we got more responses off of that session because we're, not interrogating. We're just casual conversation. We're asking questions like, hey, do you like it when everyone is out here? Would you like for, I said, would you like for the owners to leave a chair out here for you sometimes? And just questions like that. And just the EVPs that we got were just amazing. So yes, be positive, and if you're respectful, they appreciate it, and you'll get much better results. Ask them for permission to take their picture.
Yes. Let them participate. And, that's how, in a similar environment, not exactly, but that's how I got through my first voice box session when I was training at Fort Morgan with equipment. And it was just, people just left me with the H2 recorder going. And it was it was astounding. I'd never used that equipment before.
Right.
And it was a full-scale conversation. It was bizarre, totally bizarre. And it's there was a woman in the background, and I actually said, I'd like to speak to the woman, please. And the person said, why? I was like, well, because I'm a woman and this is my toy.
Right.
I want to speak to her. We can talk some more, but I want to speak to her. And they were exactly, she came forward, but you could tell that she was trying and they weren't letting her. And she came and she was the voice out. It was very, very neat to me to see that. But it lasted forever because they were chatty.
Hmm.
Nobody had ever just had a conversation with them, apparently. And the area that I was in, the woman that works the gate at Fort Morgan said that it should not have been active, that it had been, it was a newer build than the actual fort. It was out in the batteries.
Hmm.
And I got more activity there than I got inside the fort
Right.
because it was just a conversation. And I think they get bored. What you said earlier about an off the wall question, something unusual,
Hmm.
especially if you're in a location, we're right here at Sloss.
Right.
Sloss is investigated all the time.
Yes.
And it is active. It's not scary, but it is active. And it was, you know, you got to know they've been asked, do you know who the president is? What year is it? What do you do? Ba-da-da-ba-da-da-ba. And you have to bring something to the table to get a conversation started because otherwise they're not going to do it. In my experience,
Hmm.
they are not as likely to participate with you if you're doing the same old thing that they hear every other day of their lives or afterlives.
I agree. And Donald was actually just saying in the chat that the people at the location I'd mentioned earlier that have, that set out the extra chair that time, they, before we left, we, we had asked the question, would you like for them to continue to set a chair out for you when they're out here so you can sit with them? And of course, we got a yes response to it, Class A. And um, Donald was saying that they still do that to this day. So that's awesome. And
It's awesome.
something else and I'm gonna run this by and get your thoughts on it. I personally believe people are too quick to escalate cases. Um, I believe they're too quick to jump to doing cleansings, to even exorcism, things like that, and don't really do a thorough investigation a lot of times into what is truly the cause of the activity.
Yes.
But they just know there's activity and kind of go into a panic mode. And what
And
what are your thoughts?
I agree. And I don't see anything wrong with the cleansing.
Hmm.
I don't see anything that is harmed by that. To me, that's clearing negativity.
Right.
But, you get people who are, oh, I'm going to get a priest.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you, if you're going to do an exorcism, you better be getting a priest
Right.
because your average paranormal investigator is not geared that way.
Right.
And that is just the way that is. And, but, you absolutely cannot do. I got distracted. For everyone that's hearing this is Kylie the Black Lab. She feels like she must participate when I'm a guest on occasion. I apologize. She's very vocal. But I think that talk to it. If you can't hear it, not everybody can hear spirits. I can't always. Do your EVP sessions.
Hmm.
Digital voice recorders are built into telephones. Every
Yes.
smartphone has one.
Mhm.
And you do not use a ghost app for that. Just use the voice recorder
Mhm.
and ask it questions. What's your name? Do you need anything? Can I help you? And if you get a response and you're not an average paranormal investigator, call one. We're everywhere.
Yes.
But make sure that you get the information, check references, get information, and make sure that who you talk to is sound,
Mhm.
that they're not a fly by night or a wacky doodle, and get help. Find out what's going on. If you're not being harmed, and if it doesn't wig you out totally where you're just in a panic, um, don't get there. But I'm going to step in for just a minute if you don't mind, because there's conversation going on in the chat room about flashlights.
Mhm.
Um, for the record, I do not have a problem with flashlights. The reason I don't have a problem with flashlights is because I get direct responses often, and I get them more often than not, and I get them too often for it just to be random. I do know there's a theory that, oh, the battery swells up and that's what makes it come on and go off. I agree that there's always a possibility that that can happen.
Right.
But 9 times out of 10, my responses are direct to questions. The on and off is on demand. It's not just random. And to date, I have not had a session that was just random off and on and, things going on. I agree on the apps being an iffy thing. The only app I've ever seen
Mhm.
that works the way it's intended is the TAPS app. And yes, we can confirm to a client that the flashlights are a specific activity because you have video of it being direct responses. If it is a direct response and it is a continuing direct response, it turns off specifically when you ask it to, it turns on specifically to answer a question. That's confirmation. And for me, that works. And my clients are happy. But the, but the apps, I'm actually having the designer, Rick White, who worked with Jason Hawes on the TAPS app, come
Mhm.
on, because I think apps are sketchy.
Right.
I mean, everybody and their brother has the same picture of the ghost that looks like a sheep flying across the screen, yada, 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 you know?
Mhm.
And when the TAPS app came out, I was actually one of the first people using it. And I've gotten pretty surprising results. And somebody else said test with a flashlight that's not a mag light. And I have used flashlights that are not mags, they're the push button in the back, and still gotten responses. So,
Absolutely.
you
Oh.
know, that's just my opinion, and everybody has one.
Mhm.
But I do know that I stand behind the results that I have gotten with flashlights. Yes, the TAPS people use the mag light,
Mhm.
and they get results. But also, they use the push button in the back,
Right.
and I would never have thought that would work. It does. It's pretty cool.
So.
But, so anyway, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
I got off on a tangent.
hey, it's good information. That's the way I look at it, and it
Yeah.
definitely needs to be put out there. Now and the way that the way that I personally look at it is, I think it just varies by the way if you're, if you've got that video going and you have, like you were talking about direct responses, say over a period of 10, 20 minutes, it's constantly
Yes.
going off and on, then that's, I would say, somewhat compelling. However,
Well,
if
it is, but yeah, I've seen things that, I mean, I've had them
mhm,
that were not, if it's not a direct response, it gets scratched. And if it's
mhm,
not an ongoing direct response, it gets scratched. Because I'm a firm believer, if you have any doubt about it,
mhm,
you don't present it
right,
because people aren't looking for maybes when you're there.
right, absolutely. Of course, I would also, if over that same span, say you do get several direct responses, but in between questions, maybe the lights coming on or going off, or just throwing that hint of doubt, then that's where it really gets to be subjective.
Then
So,
it's doubt
right,
and it's out.
absolutely. Um,
I mean, if I have the least bit of doubt,
mhm,
then if it's not spot on, I'm not going to present that. I may keep it
absolutely.
for me,
Right,
but I'm not presenting it to my client.
right, and that's something that a lot of people don't realize is, when you're going through all those hours of data that you've collected on these investigations, you may only, and you see this on the shows and everywhere. There, you might have been there 8, 10, 12 hours, but all of your data that you're actually presenting may be 30 minutes, 45 minutes to go over everything and explain it. That's because there is so much of it that's not being presented at all because it's subjective. There's, what was found, you you couldn't absolutely determine. It may be, well, I think, but there was still that uncertainty, so it got scrapped. And
Well, yeah. I mean, when people that get paid to do this stuff
mhm,
can't agree, you know, we're out here just doing it.
mhm.
And I think that because of that, maybe we're even more stringent with ourselves than the average bear.
Oh yes, definitely.
But I know that your team and my team are very specific on, what we're going to present to a client. And you're right. It is all subjective, but if there's the least bit of doubt, you just can't run with it.
Right. Now, on the subject of apps, you brought up a very good point just a few minutes ago about smartphones and using the recorders. Most smartphones do have a really good microphone. It's like we were talking about on the show just a couple of weeks ago. My my phone that I have now has more memory, more RAM, and is more powerful than the first computer I had. And it's more powerful, has a higher resolution and better sound quality than the first camcorder I had. And it fits in my pocket instead of weighing 11 pounds on my shoulder. So,
Isn't that astounding?
yes, it is. It's amazing how much the technology has changed. But that's a very good point. Most of the quality of a lot of your microphones that you use now in phones are great. And I'm not sure, I'm on Android, but there's an app that I use sometimes on investigations. And I'm going to throw this out there just as a reminder for everyone. If you're using a phone, be sure to put it on airplane mode so that you don't mess up any other readings that you're using.
Right.
But there's an app that I use, and I'm not being paid by these people, although maybe I should after this. Um,
I don't know. You're their biggest proponent. I love it.
right. Um, there's one called Smart Voice Recorder, and it's on Android.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about Apple, but you can check. What is that? The
Play Store.
iTunes or
Oh,
what?
iTunes.
Yeah, for the Apple. Um, You can check and look it up, but that's the actual name of it, Smart Voice Recorder. It is a free app. It actually records in 44.1 kilohertz wave format. Now, for those of you that don't understand the language I just spoke, that I will put that in English. That is DVD quality sound, and that is an uncompressed file format.
Get
What
out of town.
what that means, yes, and what that means, an MP3. Everybody is familiar with that file format. You download MP3s and everything else. But have you ever noticed that an MP3 never sounds quite as good as it does on the CD?
Absolutely.
Well, the reason is that MP3 file, the file is compressed. They trim off certain bandwidths at the higher frequencies and the lower frequencies to make a smaller file. So and they compress it. So what that does is that causes a sound quality loss when they transfer it from the raw audio into that MP3 file format. The same thing happens when you record into MP3. So this is something to consider too when you're using those voice recorders. If you have the option on your digital recorders to use, if you can pick MP3 or WAV, always go with the WAV format or the .wav,
Right.
because it's uncompressed, and that may be the difference in you hearing that EVP or not. Because most of them that I've found tend to be just below the typical range of human hearing, and if when you convert it, if that frequency is being chopped, then your EVP is being chopped off with it. So that's always something to consider. But anyway, back from the science lesson there.
I love that though because Val needed to know that. She came back and asked the name of the app. So everybody needs this information. It's all good stuff that you put out there.
Well, I appreciate that. I try to share with things that I've found. Most of my education comes from the School of Hard Knocks, and lots and lots of trial and error. Um, but yes, this app, like I say, Smart Voice Recorder, super easy to use. I'm looking at it right now on my phone. Got a button at the bottom. This is super complex. I hit this button that says start recording, and then at the end of it I hit stop recording, and it saves it in that WAV format in DVD quality. So you're going to have a good you're going to have a good sound. Your frequencies are going to be intact, and all you've got to do is plug your phone up. Some phones have removable SD cards, some don't. But plug your phone up to your computer, swap it over. Use a free program like Audacity. Acoustica Basic Edition is free. There's several programs out there that are free like that. Then you have the less expensive ones. You can get WavePad, which is a really good one,
Yes.
for under $40. You do that, and it's uncompressed, it's fully preserved, and that's a great way. So there's a phone app that's really useful, and it's not one that you've got to worry about being, there's not boo sounds put in there or, fake ghost. It's just a recorder.
Yeah, those fake ghosts have gotten such publicity on the internet
hmm
because I can't tell you how many times someone will send me a picture and say, "What do you think of this?"
Right.
And I'm like, "I think that you are using this app because I saw that same ghost in San Francisco."
hmm
you know?
Right.
And it is. It's a global phenomenon that these ghosts are getting around the world. So,
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Now, a lot of people, while we're talking about EVPs and audio recording, there are a lot of people who like to analyze their EVPs backwards, and we actually have mentioned that on the show. Um,
How do you do that?
Sometimes you can reverse an EVP, and you may get clear responses that way. I'm kind of I'm not very into that idea myself,
Is
but
this like when people used to play records backwards? Ah, thank you.
mhm,
Somebody just said Audacity has a reverse feature. I've never used it. But because remember back in the day, people were like playing their records backwards and stuff. So
right. And there's one app that I found. It's free. Also, this is on Android. I'm literally sitting here looking at my phone. Um, it's called Virtual Recorder. Now it functions as a standard recorder, but as soon as you record something, you can actually um, play it backwards, like just instantly. So if you want to try that, and you're on the go, that's something that you can have, so you can do it spot on. Um, that's just something to consider. It's like I say, I'm not really big into doing the reverse EVP, but some people swear by it, and that so the way I look at it is, if you like that, that's a very useful tool, and you can't beat the price of it. It lets you adjust the
I love
pitch,
Ray.
speed, everything. Um, and there was a question about software. The um, the software that we use personally a lot of times is Acoustica. We try not to do very much alteration to the sound files,
Right.
because one of my biggest concerns is, outside of simple amplification, is if you put a lot of filters onto it. I've always been concerned about creating a false positive.
Yes.
So
Or cutting something out.
absolutely, absolutely. And me personally, I'd rather cut it out than create something. and
Well, I would too. I
uh,
mean, that goes back to having verifiable evidence.
mhm, absolutely. But I will say this: out of the free programs, now Audacity has tons of features. It is absolutely loaded to the gills as far as, for a free program, you will not beat it. But now I will say the Acoustica Basic Edition that you can download for free has a much cleaner amplification. Something that you'll notice with Audacity, and this is the only fault that I really have with Audacity, is sometimes when you have to amplify it with Audacity it can be kind of grainy and kind of coarse.
Yes.
But if you amplify with Acoustica, and we're still talking free,
Right.
um, it it will amplify it, and it's much cleaner, much clearer, so you don't have to worry about noise quite as much. But outside of that, I try to not really apply many filters. I try to keep it as close to what we actually got as possible. And I'm pretty sure that you're probably in about the same boat with me on that one.
Yes. But you guide me through so much on the Audacity in particular.
Hmm.
I got sidetracked. But I'm sorry. For those that don't know, I'm fighting a bug, and I warned Frank before. Just a little gooby. But if it weren't for your technical expertise, I would be so lost with some of the stuff anyway. But you're such a good teacher that I edited my own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, I got over the intimidation factor with the Audacity, and I didn't lose anything, and I've been using it for everything now.
Mm-hmm. And
So I do apologize for getting behind the little animals there.
and well, one thing about it is the when you're using software like that, when you first look at it, it looks absolutely foreign and just mind-blowing, and really the only way to learn it is, and this is something I recommend to a lot of people, is take a file, make a copy of it, put it somewhere you don't care about it, and just experiment with it. And that's one of your best ways. The more you use it, it's just like anything. The more you use it, the more you're going to be familiar with it, and the more you'll be able to do with it.
And it's so intimidating when you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's got all these bells and whistles, and it just is so annoying. But I actually did exactly what you said. I got idiot time on it. I set the file just right like you said. Put it somewhere. If it gets damaged, you've got the original. You just let it roll.
Right.
And not the least upsetting for.
And like you were saying, it after just playing around with it a little bit, you get familiar, and now you're good to go with it and comfortable to do pretty much whatever you'd like to do. And now keep in mind what me and Kat are talking about here is for all of the intros that I do for the show, and if there's ever anything that I need to go back and fix after we broadcast a show, I typically do that through Audacity.
Yes.
And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about complex cutting, editing, effects, filtering, and everything else.
Well, not everybody is as complex with their editing as you are. Thank you.
Well,
just want to save our bacon. But I mean, it is a great tool, and it is that kind of equipment, that kind of software.
Right. But so if we're doing all of that with it, and we're talking, 2 and 3 hour files that we're editing and working on, when you apply that to EVPs, it's, it becomes very simple. Now, another big advantage that I will throw out there for Acoustica versus Audacity and the free ones, I would say Acoustica would be my pick of the two free softwares because of it having, like I'd mentioned earlier, the more clear amplification. But another is you load up that long file, and everybody who is a paranormal investigator listening to this that has used Acoustica knows the feeling. You find your EVP, you trim down your selection to a few seconds before, a few seconds after, so you can catch the question, catch the response, and all of that fun, wonderful stuff that we go through on every single investigation. So then you take your selection, export it, name it, then repeat the process, bring everything to a halt, repeat, and you keep going. With Acoustica, there's both of these shouldn't have names that start with an A. I'm going to say that right now because it's just throwing me off. But with Acoustica, as you're going through, you can actually highlight an area that you find that has an EVP in it. You highlight it, you make one click, and you set a region marker. And then you keep listening. And all you do, when you finish listening to your entire sound file, you've got everywhere that you found an EVP marked off as these region markers. There's an export option that you can open up you can hit the file menu and export region markers to files. And it's going to instantly export every one of those selections that you've made all at one time. Yes. So that saved you so much time and headache. You're not having to stop, do this process, do this. All you do is you highlight it, you make one click. You can name it if you want to.
At that point.
You can name it, and then you keep going. And whatever your file name is, some people keep the file names as how it's imported from the recorder, and it'll have usually an odd type of number format to represent the date and maybe a couple of letters in there. Something that I recommend, and I recommend this to everyone who investigates, give each case that you go on a case number.
Yes.
And include the date that you initiate that case and the case number. That'll come in handy later. But the way that we personally do it is our case number, the first few digits of it is the actual date that the case was initiated. And I will rename the sound files that we import before they're edited and reviewed. I'll rename the sound files to that case number, and then assign them, like, it may be case number 41326 whatever, and dash 1A, just so I have some type of thing. Or maybe put an indicator on it, basement. And after you make this file name there, when you do those region markers that I was talking about, and you do that export option, it's going to export everything at once. And if you've named those markers, then at once it's going to have, your case number, dash basement, dash, if you put custom names on them, your file name will be case number, dash basement, dash mound, or case number, dash basement, dash hello, or whatever, however you name it. So it's going to instantly put a detailed name in it.
Well, that's just amazing.
So much simpler. And it's like I say, there's the only downside to the free version of Acoustica is the free version does not have a spectrum analyzer, which for those of you that aren't familiar with the spectrum analyzer, maybe you're familiar with some of the other programs that it actually shows you in a wave format what frequency that everything's in. When you look in Audacity, that waveform you're seeing is in decibels. It's not in frequency. So that spectrum analyzer is going to list everything by the frequency.
Right.
And typically your EVPs will show up just below the range of everything else. So that's a good sign. With the spectrum analyzer, you can almost look at an EVP or look at a recording without even listening to it and spot where your EVPs are going to be.
Well, for people to know, how much is the Acoustica to purchase?
I think you can get if I'm not mistaken, I would have to look it up to be for sure. I think the most basic paid version that includes a spectrum analyzer. I can't remember if it's 49 or 59, but
Oh my gosh, that would just not be
it
difficult to do,
right. It's well
to have
worth the
that
money.
kind of a power.
hmm And it's very good software. And it's like I say, even though the free version doesn't have the spectrum analyzer, the free version will do everything that a paranormal investigator really needs to do, to be honest. So that's something to consider.
That is. Because I have WavePad and I have Audacity, and I'm going to try Acoustica just to see what I think of that. Because does it go in reverse as well?
Um,
Acoustica?
I can't remember if it does on the basic edition or not. Um, I'm honestly not sure.
I'm going to check that out. That's cool. That's great information.
So, so that's definitely one to consider. Um, if you know, and always, you know, like I say, a lot of times it's easy to get caught up in the things that you see on these websites or the newest gadgets. But with paranormal investigations, I mean, really, if you're not careful, those gadgets can be more of a distraction than a help. So it so I'm going to recommend, if there is a simpler approach, take it.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's not rocket science, but you can certainly make it be.
Yes, absolutely.
Um,
And
but I have a question about something totally aside from this.
mhm, go ahead.
When we were talking about Savannah earlier, you said that's your favorite place to go.
hmm
But you also know everything there is to know about ley lines and grids. Are they there?
Well, there actually is an energy line that crosses through there. If you look at if you look on the map at about the level where Savannah is, compared in relation to, we're looking around the, I want to say 19th, 20th parallel. Um, it's going to be um, almost in line, just a little south of Atlanta, kind of on that level,
Right.
just farther on the coast, a little bit to the south. And yes, there is an energy line that goes very close to there. I believe a lot of Savannah has to do with its history, though, because
Well,
it
it's ancient.
yes, Georgia was one of the original colonies,
Mm-hmm.
and Savannah has been home to battles of every single battle that's been fought on American soil. So you
I
so
didn't realize
yeah,
that.
yes, and it's quite a history. There's a lot of people. We were talking about Moon River Brewing Company earlier, and which
Right.
I'm going to say I'm going to recommend this to you and anyone who goes to Savannah, or if you go on the tour next month with the Ghost Hunt weekends. That Savannah's an awesome place to check out, but don't just go to Moon River Brewery for the investigation, or you're going to be
Right.
cheating yourself. Go in there for lunch. It is awesome. Um, they have some they have some great appetizers. Their burgers are good. Their their beer selection isn't quite as diverse as a lot of the microbreweries, but they but what they have is unique and has really good flavor. So I'll give Moon
Okay.
River that endorsement there. But yes, it's a very active location, and if you're investigating it, it's going to be an interesting night for you. There is
Well,
there's a picture of me
what's the
actually.
biggest?
Um, there's a picture of me in there where I'm standing in front of their brew tanks, and you see a little girl standing behind me in the background.
Get out of town.
No, that's
Is that the picture that was on your Facebook?
no, that's a different one. Now I do have a picture on my Facebook from me at Moon River, and there's a couple from me around Savannah, but I'll have to dig to find that one. It's because I had a couple of very interesting photos that I brought back from there. Um,
That's interesting, Frank.
yes, there's but there's so much history there. A lot of people don't know it, but there's tunnels all throughout Savannah, and
I didn't know that.
as a matter of fact, there's the tunnels go underneath Moon River, and these tunnels were originally put in. See, Savannah doesn't have a traditional beach. It, its coast was more of a cliff. So when they started using it as a port city, what they did was they cut these tunnels that would go out to the shore and come out at about the same level. That was a lot lower, so it'd be about the same level as the ships that were coming in.
Oh, I did read this. I read this in high school.
hmm
That's
And
fascinating. I had forgotten all about that. Is that just for loading and unloading purposes, or for buccaneering, or?
well, it its main purpose was for loading and unloading, but needless to say, it those tunnels did get used as Shanghai tunnels, as they call it. Someone would,
Right.
they would get a little, they'd drink a little too much at the tavern, and next thing you know, when they wake up, they're on a ship somewhere with the option to work or be thrown overboard. Um,
Holy cow.
and there was quite a slave trade that went on. That this happened, and not just in Savannah, but in a lot of your port cities. Um, Seattle is famous for this. Because Seattle has the underground city.
Yes.
Um, they they would take these people. A lot of people were taken to other countries, sold into slavery. There was a lot of human trafficking that went on that way. There was a lot of a sex slave trade that was going, just quite a bit. Well, after that, after they started really regulating that later on into the 19th century, those tunnels ended up being used during the yellow fever epidemic that broke out in Savannah.
Oh no.
Um, Savannah was just about wiped out by yellow fever. And, at that time, they thought it was airborne. So what they did was they used these tunnels to transport when someone would die, they would transport the bodies in these tunnels underground. And they believe that has something to do with some of the residual energy. Because if
Right.
you look, these tunnels have been, if you think about it, I mean, people are carried through these, about to be sold into slavery, about to be sold into prostitution. They're, people dying, people who have died. That's that's the history of these tunnels, and more of that than their actual intended purpose. So, you can imagine the type of residual energy that would linger there.
Oh, so powerful. So
Mhm.
powerful.
And you'll see when you go into Moon River, the tunnels do go under Moon River. Um, Actually, that was the end of one of the tunnels. Um, Moon River was built, if I'm not mistaken, in the 1820s as the City Hotel, and that was its original purpose. But it was used as a makeshift hospital during the yellow fever epidemic. So there were a lot of people that died, men, women, and especially children. And if you look into the reported sightings, there's a lot of sightings of children there. Um, there, later on in its history, it was used during the Civil War as a Civil War hospital, and it's had quite a bit. Then later on, became it wasn't until, and I may be telling this completely wrong, but I want to say in the 90s is when the current owners bought it and turned it into the brewing company. Um, but yeah, there's been a lot of reports there, people trying to renovate. The upper levels are actually still pretty much the same as they were shortly after around the 30s, 40s, when the building went vacant for quite a while. And not much of that's changed. And there's been a lot of reports of when they would try to renovate, people would get attacked. There, there was one.
Physically?
Yes, there was one report of a woman who was there was a construction foreman that was on the job there. His wife comes to the job site to bring him lunch. He's working on renovating the building. She gets pushed down the steps and nearly kills her. And
Good grief.
mhm,
That's a very powerful spirit.
um, there's several reports of people being attacked in the basement there. Um, you know, being choked violently, scratched, just tons of negative activity there too. So, um,
Well, I think everything you described was negative, right?
right,
Holy
right,
Toledo.
right. It's not just that happy little girl that shows up that's in a playful mood. I mean, there's some, you know, in scientific terminology, there's some bad juju there.
Yeah. Well, there you go, being scientific again,
Right,
Frank.
right. Um,
That is just surprising to me. Paranormal poison says, has anyone tried to render that situation?
Not that I'm aware of. Now, I know there was an exorcism performed there, but I believe it was performed on the individual person and not really targeting the building. Um,
Ah,
so, and that's just one place. There are so many places there. You'll see when you go there. Um, there's one of the Dar cemeteries, and it are the Daughters of the American Revolution. You'll see the
right.
capital DAR above the sign, and I want to say it's Colonial Park Cemetery, if I recall correctly. Um, it it's one that has quite a bit of reported activity, and I got a few interesting photographs from there. Um, Actually, no, I can't be absolutely sure when I say this, but I believe I seen an apparition there. Um, all I know is I looked, I seen a person, and that person went somewhere, and I couldn't explain where they went. So now
Shadow or full body?
full body. So I can't say beyond a shadow of a doubt because I kind of had that reaction where I looked away and then thought, hey, wait, something's not right, and then I looked back and they're
Right.
gone. So I can't say for sure, but I believe I did. Um, but that particular cemetery, when you go into it, you'll see the back walls, this huge brick wall that's built up, and you'll see tombstones all across this back wall. Now those are people that are buried there that they don't know where their grave are, but they've got their marker. Um,
Had the cemetery flooded?
um,
Is that why the
it that cemetery there's so much missing history from it. The burial records aren't exactly right.
right?
Uh,
Well, it's hard for them to be.
hmm I talked to one person who was telling me that they did some excavation there to try to remedy that situation, and they when they started doing some excavation and some of the ground penetrating radar, that instead
Right.
of finding the 1,200 burials that they expected to find, that they were estimating it to be around 5,000.
Get out.
So there's a
That's
lot,
a bit more.
right? So
The was that the city of Savannah that was actively doing that, or was that the DAR?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't know. I'd have to make a call and find out on that. But I know it's quite interesting, and there actually is a YouTube video about that.
I'm gonna go look at that. But so they gave up because there were so many.
Right? They pretty much at that point figured it would be, at this time anyway, a lost cause, because there just wasn't enough historical records to support it.
That is just tragic. You know, I absolutely hate when stuff like that happens. When I lived in Georgia, down around Brunswick, around the coastal areas, we had some intense flooding, and caskets were just washing out of graves and going down the road.
Yes.
It was tragic. And then, you know, you had the problems with the bodies that were being dumped out of them, even though they were sealed, they were running into trees and rocks and stuff.
hmm
And the whole thing, besides being devastating for the living who were dealing with the flooding,
hmm
you had their ancestors just gone. I
hmm
mean, just gone. It was horrid.
Right.
And I've always thought that displaced bodies would have to lead to displaced spirits. And I just I can't fathom what that would be like.
Right. Well,
And
it. Yeah, there were so many cases, especially after in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina came through.
yes, oh yes.
Because
I mean,
yeah.
there were whole cities, including the cemeteries and everything, gone.
hmm
There's there's places that will never be again
hmm
because of, you know, but that flooding was hideous like that too. I didn't hear so much about that with the cemeteries, but of course New Orleans is below sea level. It's just terrible to to contemplate the areas that weren't prepared for something like that
And,
with the with burials and stuff.
hmm
But well, that's a whole nother tangent. Sorry.
oh, that's okay. I'm
It
loving it.
just
So.
bothers me because I think that it's horrid. I know it's not a person disrespecting.
Hmm.
It's just a nature experience, but it's still
A disturbance,
a
nonetheless.
disturbance.
That you know, I know quite a few people that live in New Orleans, and it seems that everyone that I've talked to that lived there prior to Hurricane Katrina has said that there's been such a shift in paranormal activity since
Yes.
then that it's just unreal. It really made a huge disturbance in so many ways there.
Yes. And it still is.
Hmm.
I have I have wandered New Orleans forever, and there's a lot of bad juju.
Hmm.
I mean, there is a lot more now than what's what is still there.
Hmm.
The people who are voodoo practitioners or that type of practice seem to be much more dedicated
Right.
and much more serious with their practices, and you can feel it in different parts of the quarter. So it's just odd. It's not the same place.
Absolutely. That you know, it, it's all around if you look in the news. If I mean, every day we were talking about this just before the show, how more and more that it's um, you see these things that you would never imagine seeing in a headline. I mean, I was just looking, and just a couple days ago, someone had posted an article um, about this is from Seattle, and it's talking about it's asking the question: were the gates of hell opened? Says mysterious sulfur smelling fog bank envelops city of Seattle in dense smelly fog. And it goes on to talk about this strange fog that came in, from the ocean. Of course, Seattle being a coastal city.
Right.
Um, but it was this thick fog that just, horrible smelling. Um, that the experts have no idea what caused
They often don't.
it.
I
And
don't know why they're the experts, but what um what was the date on that?
that was January the 10th. So
Yeah, that's pretty.
So I was reading that. They looked. They were, it wasn't a sewer problem. They're, they'd tried several different things. But the meteorologists had looked at it. They had the environmental scientists out looking at it, but they just, they still haven't figured it out. And of course, there's some people who, think that that's an ominous warning sign. And of course, there's, you
A lot of
know,
Native Americans there. I bet there are people
mhm,
that think that.
right? People had talked about that it might be some type of government experiment gone wrong, and people had talked about that it could be something to do with the underground city. Um, but there's still, there's just no direct
And
question
so
about
it
it.
smelled like sulfur.
Hmm. Yep.
That's not a common odor.
Mm-mm.
So my guess would be that somebody does know what that is.
Right.
I just can't can't fathom what that is. I mean, was it just centralized in Seattle?
Right, just came in off the coast and just
But
pretty
just
much
in
hit that
Seattle.
area. Hmm.
I missed that story. That's a fascinating story.
Right,
But
so it's
I
very
don't
strange.
understand.
Um,
Yeah, you kind of wonder if it goes back to being paranormal or if it goes back to Fukushima.
right,
There's all kinds of weird stuff happening in the Pacific realm right now.
absolutely, and it's just like a lot of things. It can be taken as, well, this is an environmental occurrence. It happened as this reaction, or a lot of people take it as more of a prophetic or an apocalyptic
Apocalyptic. Yeah.
warning, and so it's really all in what mindset you're in. I don't know. I believe we got a couple of good suggestions from the chat there, and that's
Yes.
I'm wondering how many people who hear this are going to watch The Fog tonight.
I saw that. Well, was it the fog that came in with the sulfur, was it just like a horribly dense fog also?
It was. They said it was very dense. And unexplainable. They described the smell like sulfur, and of course, it being that close to the ocean, they said that it had that dead fish smell
Yeah.
to it, and
Well, if there would have been a fish kill if it were really sulfur,
hmm, absolutely.
because that would have been part of it. Paranormal Poison says she's going to research that event. I am too. She hadn't heard of it. But I didn't realize that it was just localized in Seattle either.
Right.
What else you got?
Well, that just depends. You were talking about, you we were talking about the um, cemeteries that were being disturbed and everything else. Um,
Oh, yeah.
okay, I know everybody in here's seen it, but remember the movie Poltergeist?
I've never
1982's.
seen it because I don't watch scary movies, but I do know about it.
Okay, and I know some people in the chat are probably thinking, okay, what is, where's he fixing to go? He's bringing up a, early '80s Spielberg movie, but that if you've seen that movie, it, it's kind of out there. They bring in, the little woman who is the psychic who's communicating with the poltergeist, and the daughter gets sucked into the TV, and I mean there's tons of crazy stuff going on.
Well, I
But
knew about the child in the television.
well, in the movie, what happens is there's there's the house that these people move into is built. It's new subdivision built on top of a cemetery, and
Right.
you know when they build it, in one scene in particular, the pool. Yeah, there's the pool. They had that like one scene they've dug out this swimming pool that they're putting in, huge in-ground pool, and it starts raining real bad. Well, as it's raining, these coffins start popping up out of the water, and everything, they're buried beneath it because the water's loosening it up. So just you'd have to watch it
No.
if you haven't seen it. But yeah, like they're talking about in the chat, Carol Ann gets sucked into the TV, and the scariest part of that movie is um not really the poltergeist, but it was that creepy woman that they brought in playing the psychic on that. Anyone who's seen the movie, you remember who I'm talking about. I can't think of her name to save my life right now. and um, oh shoot, she do you remember that show that used to come on back early? It may have been late 90s, early 2000s. Scariest Places on Earth.
Yes.
She used to do the narration for it. You know, had that
Oh, I
woman
know who you're talking about.
woman with the real creepy voice that would do
Yes.
the narration on it. Well, you know, she's actually playing in this movie, and you hear Carol Ann, come into the light. You know, doing all of this stuff.
Oh, I've heard that.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, a lot of people don't know that that movie was inspired by a true story.
Seriously.
hmm So, that's something that not many people are aware of. But yes, Poltergeist was inspired by a true story.
Have you investigated where there was a true poltergeist?
Say that again.
Have you investigated where there was a true poltergeist?
I'm actually working a case now.
Is it local?
hmm It is.
I was just curious because I worked one with my former team
hmm
down in South Alabama, and it's absolutely the strangest experience. So
Wow.
I think that you're going to learn a lot with your case.
hmm
But the reason that I'm asked is just because it is so interesting. And the reason I don't watch scary movies is because I can't do what I do and be scared
Right.
or even have it in the back of my mind. And it makes me the odd man out because my whole team went to go see The Conjuring as a team,
Right.
you know? I mean, and I can go in that house and investigate it, but I don't like opening myself up to the negativity because what we do has that very negative side to it.
Absolutely.
And and I protect and take care of myself as well as I can, and I have tools that help me to do that and methods that help me to do that. But I feel like if I'm watching something that is that kind of that's going to induce that kind of mindset that opens my mind, there are enough possibilities that I have to consider anyway, and you have to consider
Absolutely.
anyway, that I need to be in evaluation and analytical and empath awareness mode when I go into an investigation. And I just think that that when I watch and expect, I used to watch stuff that was like silly scary when I was young, but I just can't. I just can't do it and do what I do now.
Right. Well, you know, and like we're talking about with the poltergeist case, that the only way to combat that is it takes positive environment immersion.
Yes.
And, you know, that's something that I tell people all the time. I'd rather deal with an exorcism or, you know, anything but a poltergeist because it is so hard. Because to to truly combat it, you have to get these people to change the way that they think. You have to change what they're afraid of, when they're afraid, how they react when they hear a noise, or you know, it, and that can be the most challenging thing because not only the person that it's emanating from, but everyone in the household.
Yes. And they're all affected.
Yes. So it it's definitely um, you know something that takes it's a lot of aftercare, a lot of counseling. I mean, just
Yes.
you know, it's quite an undertaking. And
And finding a counselor
mhm,
is difficult for that,
right,
especially when, yeah, the situation I was in was that the team leader was fascinated by the case and continued to investigate,
Oh,
and there wasn't resolution.
right. And what was it? Kind of one of those cases where there's not really a resolution because they wanted to continue investigating and didn't want to wanted to prolong the case.
The case was being prolonged, and the individual that the activity was originating with had other issues. They were a cutter,
Hmm.
and they were a survivor of different types of emotional abuse with potential for physical.
Hmm.
And they had they had gifts as well on top of that. And so the emotional side was just overladen, and that team leader actually was angry because I spoke with the individual that it was stemming from and directed them to an organization called To Write Love on Her Arms,
Hmm.
which is for self abuse and self mutilators. And I don't work with that team anymore.
Right. Right. And I can't say that I blame you. I mean,
Nobody should live in that kind of pain.
well, and evidence is great. And if you've got an environment that you can study and do your research in, yes, that's fantastic. But
Not at someone's expense.
right, absolutely. Client safety is always number one. And, you know, client safety, your team safety, that always has to be, top priority. Um,
Yes,
and you have to take that into consideration as an investigator when you go out. You have to constantly be asking yourself the question, is what I'm doing when I leave, is how is this going to affect these clients?
absolutely, because they're the reason we're there.
When is this going to cause a negative impact or a positive impact on this situation? Am I stirring things up and making it worse for them? If so, you don't need to go.
Exactly.
And
And
I can't stress that enough. Be careful when, you know, you don't have to live in these houses, but these people that are calling you, they do. So,
absolutely, that is the biggest rule. Kim, my team founder,
hmm.
is always stressing to everyone, and I totally agree that, we get to go home. We get to leave. We get to go home. There's not going to be repercussions as a rule to us. It has happened, but not often. And, you know, those people have to live there. They have to go to sleep that night when you leave. They have to get up and take care of their children in that home the next day. And you have to take care of your client. And, even if it's a frightening environment,
Hmm.
you can you can give them peace about what you're doing there. And Donald says you can make it worse. You darn
Hmm.
sure can.
Absolutely.
But that's not why you're there. You're supposed to be helping.
Mhm. Well, there's actually several cases that we've had to take. One being behind a very, very high profile team. Um, I won't name them, but I will say that it's a fairly common household name
Right.
that has came in and actually made the situation much worse and left the clients hanging after they left.
That happened to a friend of mine in Key West.
Hmm.
They came and investigated her house, and there was more there when they left. And, she's not sure if it's just because the the house and the area around it became more active, or if it was brought there.
Hmm.
But stuff happens. You have to be so careful when you go into someone's home. You have to be cleansed
Yes.
before you ever walk out of your house and protected. But, you can't risk taking something somewhere else.
And that's absolutely true.
I just heard a strange noise. Was that you?
Yes, that was
Okay.
actually my phone going off.
I thought it was me because usually it's, a bark. But it's just the way it is. Some
Hmm.
clients cannot be helped, said King. And sometimes that's true. But
Right,
those are usually the ones who are trying to cling to what they have.
right.
The place that I mentioned in South Alabama just may wind up, if Paranormal Witness goes back to air, they may wind up on it.
Hmm.
Some of those people are looking for notoriety and fame. So that that may be the case. And but I just could not be party to leaving someone that could have been helped unhelped.
Exactly.
Usually you can do something.
And it seems like one of the one of the most common things that I've found is someone lives in a state of fear for so long
Yes.
that it becomes the norm.
Yes.
And actually eliminating that situation, they, you hear them all the time, they want it gone. But when it comes down to doing what it takes to get out of that situation, and of course this applies to so many things outside of the paranormal as well,
True.
it when they're faced with that opportunity to make that move to remedy that situation, it's like they're so familiar with that negative situation that they're almost scared to move past it. That
Yeah.
fear controls them. And
They're locked down.
hmm right, that fear controls them, and that negativity just fuels the situation that they've got. You see it. That's and I 100% believe that's why so many of the cleansings and other things that people have done, I believe that that's why they aren't effective.
Yes.
Is if you have to look at it this way. If if I want to lose weight, um, I can exercise for one day, but if I don't do it every day, it's not going to do me any good. Or if I
I
don't
know, darn the luck.
right, or if I don't eat differently every day, it's not going to do any good. And that's what a lot of people
Yes.
don't quite understand is with the paranormal, it works the same way. Those actions and that aftercare plan that's put in place initially at the cleansing, that you have to stick to it, or you risk finding yourself back in that situation that you were in when you
Well,
initially
it's more than
contacted the team.
risk. You will find yourself back in that situation.
Hmm.
But I guess really depending on the disposition of the spirits when you leave, what you did while you were in that home. But I
Hmm.
really think that fear factor causes people to invite the activity back because they don't trust that it's gone. You're right.
Hmm. So that's the one thing to always consider is you're not just there to collect evidence, and there's the investigation is only just a small percentage. You
Yeah.
know, um, you have to always consider that. Um, and something I was just kind of looking over, and this is just way out of left field. Earlier we were talking about people being more open to the paranormal and how society has changed. And earlier we were kind of having a little makeshift history lesson that I hope I didn't screw up too many details on. But I was kind of looking a little bit on the Salem witch trials,
Ah,
and which of course everyone has heard about. And, that just shows really, how much times have changed, because at that time, it was very easy. If you were accused of being a witch, you were put to death. And you remember one of
That was
the,
it.
right? Well, one of the ways to determine that you were a witch was, the dunking.
Yeah.
For anyone not familiar with that, a dunking, they would tie a woman up, or a man, whoever was accused of witchcraft, and put them in the river, tied up in a chair, and they would float down the river. Well, if they couldn't escape the chair, then they must have been innocent. But if they do escape the chair, then they must have used witchcraft to escape it. So
Yeah.
so then they come back on shore, having survived this, only to face
Be
being
burned.
found guilty of being a witch.
Hanged or burned.
Mhm.
Yeah. Man's inhumanity to man always overwhelms me.
But
But could you imagine me? I mean, I, I can't even imagine being alive at that point and having to defend myself. I can't even fathom that.
right, it's unreal. But now here's a little trivia question. I'm gonna throw at everybody out there.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, yeah. Especially, I'll see if I can get an answer from the chat room.
Thank you. Yes.
So I'll do that, because I know you're on those medications and having to deal with an
They're
affliction right
vitamins.
now.
It's not tasty. Huh?
So, I said I
What
know.
did you say?
Oh, I said that I know that right now you're having to take those medications for that affliction you've got called the creeping crud right now. So I'll go easy on you.
Creeping crud.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the official diagnosis, I'm sure. Um, but how many people accused of witchcraft during the Salem witch trials were put to death?
I bet there's one person in that chat room that knows the answer to that.
And I'll tell you what, I'll throw out a couple of numbers: 4, 20, or 51. See if we can get an answer. The chat room's really quiet right now because everybody's on Google right now.
Donald popped right up there.
Oh,
An angel. We've got
Okay.
10, 13, and 20.
mm-hmm.
Come on, Poison. What you got?
Yeah, let's see if we can get any other guesses. We're at
She
2.
lives in Massachusetts, I think, so I don't know if that would be fair. She said all of them. She's right. But I don't know what the number is.
Okay, so we got
Don said 511. Val said 19. Donald says he meant 23. I think it was the 51.
the
I actually thought it was higher than that.
okay. Is everyone ready for the answer?
Yes.
The
Val says 19 were hung. Don says 51.
Okay, the answer is 20.
That would be Angel. Good job, Angel.
The
King wanted his lawyer first.
right, right. 19 were hung. 1 was burned.
Good, Val. Val said 19 were hung.
Right, and Angel popped up there with the first correct answer on
She
20.
did.
So,
And we do not
Or,
have
excuse me.
parting gifts, Angel. I'm sorry.
and excuse me, I was wrong. I said 19 were hung and 1 was burned. I meant to say pressed.
Pressed.
Pressed to death.
Get out.
Yep.
What is that?
That is one of those nice
Like
little.
mushed?
Yes, where where they would put you, they would put the plate on top of you, and they'd pile all the weight on top till you pretty much
From
became a
crushing me.
pancake. Hmm.
Holy smokes. Well, that's not a cool way to go.
Right on. Really, if you think
I can't
about it,
fathom. Who thinks that's a good idea?
you what?
That's just
Yeah,
we have a fun chat room. People who are listening and aren't in the chat room, y'all are missing so much. You
yes,
should hit it up.
yes, and one thing about it is with the pressing. Um, I will say this: it takes a pretty gruesome death to make being burned at the stake or being hung look desirable.
Yeah.
So,
Uh,
but so,
what
oh, go ahead.
what else you got?
Well, actually,
Oh, do you I'm gonna go there. Do you remember that Ghost Adventure show that was based in Salem?
um,
Did you watch that or see any video from that?
I know I've seen it.
It was so amazing because they actually got EVPs with the woman's name that they were trying to reach. And I don't always know what I think about that, but the EVPs were pretty astounding.
Well,
So I think the activity there is still ongoing and still really strong. But I would love to do an investigation up there.
yes. Well, much like we were talking about with Savannah and with Georgia. I mean, if you look at that area, the history goes so far back. I mean, the witch
Yeah, I
trials
mean,
stand out, but that's 1692 is the most popular period that this happened. But it goes back so much farther. So,
it's just, there's so much activity through New England and all through there.
mhm.
The original paranormal investigators worked in that area because that's where everything was happening that they knew of. It's just it's just powerful.
Abs-
Oh, that no, I've never been to a prison camp. I couldn't go to a prison camp.
there's
Dal had
actually
asked,
um, did you know there's actually one fairly close to us?
like, go shall?
Um, there was a old POW camp, um, and there's a POW cemetery out on Fort McClellan out in Anniston, Alabama.
What were their POWs? What era?
This World War II era. So there's
I did not know that, but I'm making a note.
yes.
Well, who are the what level of ah Japanese?
Um, the one of the
That says yeah.
one here was the one for Fort McClellan that's out in Anniston was German and Italian, and
German and Italian.
the original POW camp was, if I remember right, it was built large enough to hold 2,500 prisoners. But but yeah, you can actually go out, or well, you have to actually get onto the military side to go where the actual camp was. Um,
Right.
now the the cemetery is on the civilian side of the old base.
Okay.
So it's, you can go up there. It's small. There's um, not um, not many graves in it, but there, out of one of the graves there's actually a German general buried out there.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. So,
Paranormal Poison said Gettysburg was used as a prison camp for the Germans.
huh,
I did not know that.
I didn't either. That's awesome.
I just can't. Were these people who were brought here at McClellan? Were they
Yes.
brought as prisoners of war from the battle?
Yes, they were brought there, and they were allowed to, they did a lot of the work on the base. They built many of the buildings. I I was doing some research on it here a couple of years ago, and Fort McClellan, there are quite a few hauntings reported. And matter of fact, the Anniston Star ran a newspaper article. When the base downsized, um, it it sold off some of the old officer and enlisted housing to the city, and the city in turn sold it. And so there are people that live in this one particular area that almost every house on that circle reports some type of paranormal activity.
Get out. That's pretty amazing.
And as a matter of fact, I'm going to Google it real quick because I believe
Okay.
I believe I can go straight to that article. But it's quite fascinating. But
You have to post that link in the chat.
yes.
And King wants to know, would you investigate Chernobyl?
No, I really wouldn't. Um, Not really because of being worried about the paranormal aspect, but
Radiation.
right, I wouldn't really want to deal with the running the risk of encountering any kind of radiation or anything like that. I don't mind getting evidence for ghosts or whatever, but not really looking to become one anytime soon.
I saw a 60 Minutes thing where they have to monitor the whole time, and the reporter who had gone in had to monitor the whole time. And I don't have any interest in that either. And then King says, why not go to Auschwitz? And King, I think if I went into Auschwitz, they would be pulling me out on a stretcher. I don't think I would cope with that very well. I'm a little bit too sensitive, and I have friends who have been there, and it was horrid, because just from hearing them talk about it, I can feel it, and I can't even fathom going there. That is too much pain, too many fingernail scratches on the walls, too many children
Yes.
who were killed, and too many people that want to act like it didn't happen, and that means that it will happen again. And I don't want to experience that. If you
Absolutely.
don't believe your history, it shows right back up. Just my opinion. That was a little heavy. Sorry. But it is what it is.
Right, and I agree that a lot of people don't really consider that. But when you go into some of these places, it can be kind of overwhelming, to say the least.
I would have probably been fine there. 2 years ago, but I just couldn't do it now. Whatever is upgrading me is doing a really good job of it.
Hmm.
And just in the last while, it's gotten a little radical. Ooh, Pearl Harbor. Val mentioned Pearl Harbor as being another place that she doesn't want to go. I think that I've always wanted to go to Gettysburg. I don't think I would. I don't know how I would deal with that now. But Val says that she didn't know she was a sensitive until she went into Dachau. I know that I am, so I know I don't want to. Oh, and she also says that they found spirits cavern diving.
Huh.
So,
And
that's,
that wouldn't be surprising, actually, because there's so much paranormal activity associated with water. So, and definitely outside the traditional means of investigation. I want to go with Val's team.
you want to go where?
I want to go with Val's team on an investigation.
Hey, Val and her husband came with us to Sloss Furnace. She's friends with Kim as well. She went on Kim's haunted Shelby County tour.
Oh, okay.
And then she came with us to Sloss Furnace for a nighttime investigation.
Mm-hmm.
The spirits that they found cavern diving, she sent me photos of. And they weren't looking. They just were there when they got their pictures and were looking at them. And King says that, if you can't find evidence there, you can't find it anywhere. Talking about Gettysburg and places like that. He's right. He is absolutely right. If you're not looking, you're not going to find it. But if you're looking someplace like that, you're going to run out of time to look. So
that Gettysburg has so many there's so many reported sightings, and not just it's not just by random people. I mean, you have very credible people that are coming forward with accounts from Gettysburg and places like that.
yes, and there's so much thermal evidence too, which I find fascinating.
Yes. That reminds me of a conversation that this kind of ties back to the equipment. And we were talking earlier about phone apps and things like that. Have you seen the FLIR 1? Or heard of that?
I have so heard of that, and it's the only reason I want an iPhone.
Well,
I don't think it's available for my Android yet.
Well, I will say this: I would hang on to the Android right now, because according to their website, I was just looking at this the other day, and it's supposed to be ready for Android as well now.
Get out of town.
Let me see. I'm pulling up their site right now, and I see one on a Galaxy.
I'm boring. I'm still on an HTC One.
Let me see.
No upgrade in sight.
Right. Well, I see one that they have for a Galaxy S5.
That's pretty awesome.
So, but for those that aren't familiar with the FLIR 1, a cheap FLIR, or your thermal imaging that you see on a lot of television, and this is not something that they're marketing for paranormal research. This is, when you pull up the main image, it's showing use for it shows a construction worker using it, and there's so many uses. But it's got a dual camera, and it it uses that dual camera. One actually is the temperature sensor, and the other will pick up the image itself, and it overlays the two, so that it gives you a little bit more depth than a typical thermal image.
Right.
There's more outlines, things like that. So the way it looks is really neat because it's much more detailed than your typical system. But a cheap FLIR, you're looking at a couple $1,000s. You know,
That's right at
right. You know, maybe you could find one for around 1,000 now, 1,000, 1,200. This system, it attaches to the phone and starts off, you know, right around $300.
Yeah, Kim was telling me about that. I have lust in my heart for that.
Right. Right. And we're not talking about one of those crazy ghost apps or anything like this.
Nope.
Now keep in mind for, you know, for everyone who's listening to this show, if you go download the FLIR 1 app or any thermal imaging app and you do not have an actual thermal imaging sensor on your phone, you may get some readings, but they won't be accurate.
No.
You know, your phone has a thermal sensor on it, but it's not that precise. It won't work more than an inch or so away.
But I so want one.
Yes.
It's not my next piece of equipment to get, but it's right on my list.
Right. So, you know, because all of us out there doing investigations are on a budget. I mean, there's very few of us who have a blank check for the equipment fund.
True that.
So, you know, that's something to try out because, hey, if you can get results from a FLIR for around $250 and it's enough that you can try it, see how you like it, kind of before you want to spend, you know, 1,000 or more for the El Cheapo edition, then, you know, that's definitely something to look into.
Well, yeah, I will say that if you're looking for a FLIR on the cheap, that fire departments get funding to have these, but they have to be upgraded fairly regularly. And if you're in the position and you're looking for one, contact your local fire department.
Yes.
Even a small rural fire department has to use one, and theirs are funded by the government, and they will have to upgrade it. So if you're in a position to take advantage of that, it's a good place to be.
Right. And not only that, sometimes you can find government auctions and everything else where they
Yep.
dump off some of this equipment. So that, and not only do they get rid of that, but they also get rid of tools. Some of those tools, sometimes you can find electrical equipment. And of course,
Yes.
electrical equipment sometimes consist of the, you know, your EMF detectors. So you never know what kind of equipment you might find. So always look at
You
those.
sure don't. And you know what? All it is a website to peruse. You just have to Google and be diligent. Mainly diligent.
Right, right. That's, you know, you're not going to go on there, you know, and one, you know, at one shot and find everything you want. But, you know, if you're patient, keep an eye out.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, and you know the same. And I'm going to say, if you're looking for ghost hunting equipment, this is completely different. But you know, you can use eBay, but don't put paranormal in your search engine,
no,
and don't put ghost. If you're looking for EMF detectors, Google an EMF detector. If you're looking for a specific camera need, if you're looking for, full spectrum cameras, Google that, because if you put paranormal or ghost in there, your price jumps 3 times.
Absolutely.
And that's for the start price.
Uh, Talking about paranormal equipment, I'm gonna throw a question at the chat room, and to everyone listening, we'll see if you can get it right. The mail meter. Almost every team has one. You've seen them on every TV show, every paranormal website, whatever. Um, the mail meter has, all of them have the model number in them. Mel, MEL dash 8704, and then that's the base model number for all of them. Okay, so who in the chat room can tell me what Mel 8704 stands for? Where that came from?
Yeah, I know that. I'm not going to do that. Anybody? Are you familiar with millimeters?
Let's see. And of course, anyone not listening, that's um, that's the EMF detector you see that has the white body on it with the digital display and has the temperature probe on it. Simultaneously reads your EMF reading and temperature. Let's see. Okay.
We're not getting. We're getting guesses, but they're not right yet.
Right. There's a couple of hands. Angel says, year it was made, day it was invented, and a no clue. Should we fill them in?
Yes, because it's actually a tribute.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the reason every millimeter has.
Oh, wait a minute. And this is the reason it was invented also.
Yes.
This is the reason it was actually created.
Mm-hmm. The designer or the inventor of it was, he decided to invent this because his daughter was lost tragically in a car wreck, and he wanted to attempt to communicate with her. So he went in, he designs all of this, and his daughter's name was Melissa. She was born in 1987 and died in 2004. So he put Mel for Melissa, and of course her birth year, 87, and the year she died, 04, as the base model number. And wow, Mel, timing is everything. So,
but that really was, she was actually killed in a vehicle accident right down the street from their house.
right.
And using this equipment and voice recorders, they have been able to communicate. They've seen full body apparitions of her in the home. And it's so tragic, but it's
Yes.
such an honor and tribute to her.
Right.
So,
And
pretty cool.
and he not only designs that, but he's also the same person who designed the K2, the
Yes.
SB7, the SB11, and a lot of other equipment that you see.
And he is a man on a mission.
Yes, Gary Galka, he, um, just absolute genius, to say the least. Um, if you look up at, I'm not the biggest Ghost Adventures fan out there, but if you go to YouTube or somewhere like that and look up the Ghost Adventures episode of the Galka family, it will actually tell the whole story. They go out to his house and set up, and they do it on her birthday.
Yeah.
And it actually probably the best episode of Ghost Adventures I think I've ever seen.
Ever.
So.
And I don't usually watch ghost hunting shows per se, but that one was very moving.
Yes.
And it was very good evidence. And it was just intense.
Right. So, hey, here's another question. What U.S. president filed a UFO report with the International UFO Bureau after being an eyewitness to a UFO incident?
I got my hands up, but I'm not going to answer this because I know they know in there. They're talking dogs. And it's a big, hairy deal because he was actually ridiculed a bit, too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So.
You know that took some stones.
Oh, yeah. Yes, definitely.
Can we say that on the radio?
Oh, yeah.
It's internet. We can, right?
Right.
But it really was amazing. Nope, not him. We got a Reagan in there.
Nope.
Anybody else?
Well, let me see. No other guesses? Anybody?
He's Googling.
Bueller? Bueller? Anybody? Bueller?
I feel like a spitfire here. Nobody's right yet. We got Eisenhower. We got Nixon or Ford. King, the question is, which U.S. president filed a UFO report? No, not Kennedy.
No.
Anybody? King, your Google is slow. Poison got it. It's Carter. Yes,
Yep.
Jimmy Carter and Rosalind both saw it.
Yep.
They were actually in the back of a limousine, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that is correct. So yes, Jimmy Carter actually did see a UFO and filed a report on it.
Had the audacity to stand up for himself. Go figure. You know, that's something that Chase and I, my guest last week, and I were talking about. But, Val, you should have supported Lewis. But it is, that's funny. People have such a difficult time. You know, she is a rapid response team member for UFO reports. You know, she's former deputy director of operations for MUFON, and she has a lot of history with that. And a point that she had brought up was that it's so difficult to come forward and, you know, take what's going to come at you when you do that. And, you know, because people are so quick to belittle and judge, and,
Right.
you know, heck, Jimmy Carter got harassed just because of his accent. I can't imagine what that would be like.
If you're in any kind of office, they're going to find something.
Yeah. But, you know, I was just laughing about the accent because the last time we were on together, people were like, "Oh, I love your accents." So.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what. You're talking about famous people and people in office or positions of power. Here's another question, and I want to see, and I doubt Google will help very much with this one. But what famous apparition on horseback appeared to the 20th Maine Division on their way to join the Union Army at Gettysburg in July of 1863? And
Kylie knew that answer.
And so I'll throw a couple of guesses out there and we're asking about what famous apparition appeared on a horse to 20th Maine Division while they were on their way to join the Union Army to give them backup at Gettysburg. Was it George Washington,
Paul Revere.
Paul Revere, Benjamin Franklin, Nathan Hale, or Patrick Henry?
We've got a Paul Revere in the box.
Got a Paul Revere. Okay.
Got Patrick Henry.
Okay, don't have a right answer yet. Wasn't Colonel Mustard. Paranormal Poison. Got it. It was George Washington.
Well done.
They actually reported that they seen him. Not that they came to. According to the story, they were going down, and of course there weren't exactly many roads at this time that were very well developed, especially out in a lot of the more rural areas. And according to the legend, they came up to this fork in the road, and they say that, and this wasn't just the lower enlisted. I mean, this was the colonels, the generals that were reporting seeing this, the officers, who said that they seen George Washington appear on a horseback, and he pointed toward which direction they needed to go. And
Get out.
And absolutely, it pointed to the direction. They took it, and it got them to Gettysburg just in time to support the Union Army to win that battle. So
That's fascinating. Cool beans. And Paranormal Poison also says there were 10 roads leading into Gettysburg, and that's why the battle took place there.
right, there's it. You know, a lot of people don't take into consideration how rural these places were. And they're, you know, these roads, and you use the term roads loosely. They were literally wagon trails that, you know, and a lot of them were so small that two wagons, if they met, one would have to get over to let the other one pass. So
That's just wild.
that's great work there, Paranormal Poison. So, hey, I just got a tweet.
There you go.
Or well, no, I take that back. That wasn't a tweet. My phone just thinks I'm rather good looking tonight.
There you go.
Let me see. You're welcome, Paranormal Poison, and actually, that's a very good point. That most of those were the old Indian trails that were turned into roads, and a lot of your roads that are used today were actually put in place over those old Indian trails.
Well, pretty much it was all Indian trails through that area, except for where the actual houses are. Right?
Right. There's quite a bit, and that's not just in that area. That you know, that's over a lot of the country. That, you know, including our area here. So sometime I'll sometime I'll get with you and I'll pull out a map and show you some of the places that it'll amaze you. Just how many of our major roads that come through this area were put on old Indian trails.
Well, I was just up in North Alabama. I had gone up to visit a friend who had come up from the coast to stay with her mom, which is a whole nother story. That's way too much detail. But the road that I was on was the original Trail of Tears.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it was just astounding that the energy and stuff through there. It was It was just amazing.
It really is, and especially if you ever get to go out into some of the reservations and tour some of the old sites. That um, it there's so many of if you look at the way, especially if it's mostly preserved very well, and you can see the old burial mounds and some of the historic structures like that. It's just amazing. Um, and it's really a shame that there's so many of the Indian sites that weren't preserved.
Yeah, I just can't. I don't know. It's the same thing. We were in Cherokee, North Carolina recently, and there's very little original structure through there. And the heritage is there, but the area is geared for tourism.
Right.
And it's not what I remembered from when I was younger, when I went there, and it was more, I guess, more real.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that it had lost its identity, maybe.
Right. Right. More of a commercialism there, because how many places do you go when you see the wooden Indian outside the store, and you walk in and there's little toy tomahawks and
Or the little swingy drums.
Mm-hmm.
And, most of that is not Cherokee made. I just thought that, I don't know, I just thought that it would be different. And I also thought that that it would just be more comfortable.
Right.
C.A.S.P.I.R, made in China. And it was just not what I anticipated, and I was disappointed, and I was sad for the people there, and I had never realized that there's a casino there now, but you can't get your nails done unless you're at the casino. You can't really eat out much, at least in the wintertime, unless you're at the casino.
Mm-hmm.
We were there 3 days before they were going to be closing even the Forest Ranger station, so there wouldn't be any of that. It's just so, it just shuts.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that either. I figured that it would be more like, Boulder or somewhere where they stay there.
Right.
And they don't. They just completely shut down the mountain passes. The Blue Ridge Parkway was already closed. And nobody really had much to do. And I just thought that was sad. Because, that's my heritage just like it's yours.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it something that I would like to find a way to address. But, moving away from the melancholy side of that, I had Lloyd Auerbach on my show recently, which
Mm-hmm.
and we were discussing sensitivity
Mm-hmm.
and parapsychology and mentalism and all kinds of other stuff. And I made the comment that so many people in our area who are psychics and mediums and physical mediums are Native American.
Yes.
Or claim to have a Native American background.
Mm-hmm.
And primarily Creek and Cherokee in this area. And he said that was unusual because in California and other parts of the country, that doesn't seem to be the case. Don't you find that interesting?
That is.
Why do you think that is?
Well, and this is just complete speculation, but this is just my own little personal opinion on that. The Native Americans have always always had a reputation for being very spiritual, very open to their environment, very in tune with nature, and they um, you know that being considered, there of course was the migration with the Trail of Tears,
Right?
and when they many of them went out west. There were some that remained in this area. So, and it almost makes you wonder, and this is something I've always thought that it could be, is something in the genetics.
Hmm.
Because it is so many of the Native Americans that seem to have those attributes. And so I've wondered, is it something that's because you know there's so many studies that have been done in parapsychology about sensitivities, about different gifts that have shown that usually they're hereditary. And
Well, yeah.
so it makes you wonder, is it something in the genetics? Could possibly somehow the way that you know whatever mates they chose, however the lineage went and on in this region differed from the ones that actually went out west. Could it have been different to, could have just been a different mix that caused it, that allowed for it more?
I don't know, but when you move to the Western Plains, then you get you've got the Sedona
Hmm.
area, and you've got all these other places that are considered portals or sacred, bizarrely holy places.
Hmm.
And I mean, I personally have a very strong draw to Sedona,
Hmm.
and it's just kind of a. It's just kind of a quandary because, yes, the Cherokee and people in this region were abused and were treated so poorly
Hmm.
and just everything but wiped out completely. And, you know, that you have the other side of that coin with the environment on the other side of the country. So I was just curious.
Right.
But
That's my personal theory.
yeah,
I
it's
think it
good.
lies in the genetics. Well, I really
Yeah,
do.
because, the angst that came through would be something also passed down besides just genetics. Maybe the stories become embedded too, the history.
Absolutely. And it's really um, it's really fascinating when you start studying genetics, and not just talking about the Native Americans, but just in any aspects. When you see the sensitivities, the different extrasensory perceptions that are passed down through bloodlines, it becomes really amazing when you study it. And not only with that, but and this is something that's always puzzled me. If you study UFO reports, in the um, in, in a lot of those, especially the abduction cases,
Right.
if you'll
Oh,
notice,
yes.
it tends to follow bloodlines.
Yes.
If the mother's if the mother experiences what she believes to be an abduction, then the daughter stands a 10 times higher chance of also experiencing it, and so does the grandchildren.
Yes.
It's really amazing when you start looking into that. So,
That's a whole different ball of wax, too. That is such a bizarre history.
right, it really makes you wonder what's fueling that. How is that linked? And there have even been cases. I was watching a documentary not too long ago, and it had one woman talking who they literally moved across the country after she experienced it.
Did
She
it save her?
she talked. Well, she said that her mother, after she described her experience, her mother opened up and said that she also had those experiences. So this woman, she became afraid that her daughter was going to have these same experiences. They literally moved across the country, and within a year and a half of them moving, sure enough, the experiences started up again.
That's what I was afraid of. You
Mhm.
know, it's that is just such a bizarre phenomenon. And when Chase
Mhm.
was on Wednesday, we were talking about people's perceptions of extraterrestrials
Mhm.
and about how, so many people are like, well, we're we're having, they're coming back here to help us. They're providing technology. They're coming to see how we're doing this, that, and the other. And I said, well, do you think that? And she said, um, I I don't know. I said, well, do you hear as many negative stories and experiences as you hear positives?
Mhm.
And she said, absolutely, I do. She said that it's not all, technology and friendship and coming in peace. It's it's she didn't say we're science experiments. She
Right.
would never say that, but um, it kind of makes you wonder if it would be a good thing for us to be exposed to that.
Well, let me throw.
And
Oh well, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going to throw a question at you, but I'll let you finish first.
Go ahead.
Um. Well, what I was going to throw at you is it. If you look at some of the case studies, a lot of times where one paranormal incident's reported, there are other types of paranormal incidents reported as well. Um, it, like Point Pleasant,
Right?
Mothman, perfect example. A lot of people don't realize that the Mothman prophecies, that movie was actually inspired by the true
Yeah.
events that happened.
Yeah.
There were 46 people that died in the bridge collapse at Point Pleasant, and everybody knows of the um, of people seeing the Mothman. But did you know that at that same time, people were experiencing poltergeistic activity? There was a flood of ghost sightings. There were Bigfoot sightings. There were
Bigfoot too.
Bigfoot. There were UFO reports. There were, uh, just it was just a hailstorm of paranormal activity around Point Pleasant before the bridge collapsed. And it wasn't just right there immediately before. It was for about a 2-year stretch prior to it. It's
Wow.
like they were all connected. And a lot of times when people have a you know a severe negative haunting, usually they'll report seeing Bigfoot or
Yeah.
like Sasquatch sightings on the property in a
Well,
lot
there's
of cases.
also
And there's a link between the people seeing the graves and the Bigfoots.
Right.
So, have you ever wondered about how they might all be linked together?
I think that it's all collective consciousness experiences, and people have what they are um, comfortable with, maybe.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I am not a cryptozoologist, but when I asked Chase what the most reported phenomenon is that she, investigates, and that was a question that King had had, it was Bigfoot.
Hmm.
And I just think that, wow. Um, I think that there was an interesting comment in the chat. I'm sorry. But I think that natural phenomenon like earthquakes,
Hmm.
like other things, create and feed psychic or paranormal phenomenon.
Hmm.
I think that when people, I don't really know how to phrase it. I think that people, oh, that was a mad dog. But the whole thing is just kind of everything is tied together. I think that every aspect is tied together. I am sorry that I'm not that familiar with Mothman, except that it is a curse and that there were so many deaths. I do know that the phenomenons, the other phenomenons, do come in clusters.
Hmm.
And I just think that, like Southern gentleman said, all depends on what people are open minded to as well. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. If you're comfortable with it,
Hmm.
or sometimes even if you're not, though, it's still going to come to you. And that's just the way that is. It just shows up.
Well,
And what do you think? I mean, did that answer you? Was that concise enough? I feel like I kind of wandered through that.
no, no, I thought it was great, and I'm gonna throw my little scientific opinion in on it as well. I think, like you brought up, the earthquakes and the disruptions in the natural environment. Well, we all know that the Earth has a magnetic field around it
Yes.
that's constant. Uh, the there's all these energy lines that go through the planet. There's all these natural forces that are enacting around us, and I'm not meaning that in a paranormal way. I mean naturally occurring forces that act on us. You have cosmic rays. You have solar. The solar radiation. You've got your lunar gravity. You've got the Earth's gravitational field. You've got the energy lines, energy waves pulling, magnetic waves. All of this is enacting around you constantly.
Yes.
And when that happens, you your body gets used to a certain level of it, and your body's used to being exposed to it at all times. So when there is an earthquake or a flood or something like that that causes this huge um, disruption in the natural
Yes.
environment, well, it's going to, and this even goes with, like we had mentioned at the beginning of the show, is an erratic lunar cycle or solar flares or solar storms, things like that. It's
But we've actually been having those lately.
Yes, lots of them, and um, when that disruption occurs, your that static level that your body is used to being exposed to fluctuates, and you have to wonder how does it affect your perceptions. Maybe it boosts them in some cases. So I've
I
always
think it
wondered about
definitely
that.
does.
And
I mean, you can't have all that stuff changing around you and not be touched by it.
Absolutely, I agree. And you mentioned the solar flares that we've been having lately. I will say this: I can watch I can go to NASA's website and look when we have a solar flare, and if we have a flare, a storm, something like that, I can almost set my watch by it. I know that 3, 4 days after that
Yep,
flare, my phone is going to ring off the hook.
absolutely.
It never fails. It's like every time that happens, paranormal activity will be ramped up, and it's going to elevate to a level that people are going to call and say, "Hey, I don't know what happened last night."
Gotta have that. Absolutely. I mean, that's 100% right. And I think it's just that's just so much energy.
Hmm.
And, if you are, if you're getting that much energy, it's going to feed the paranormal. To me, I just think it's an interesting concept, but I know it affects me like nobody's business. It affects my sensitivity. It affects my ability to read people.
Hmm.
It affects my moods.
Hmm.
It affects everything.
Well, and then you have I can't remember the exact term for it, but you have the effect where when people with certain abilities anyway get together and piggyback off of one another's
Oh my
abilities.
goodness.
You
The first time
take
that happened, it freaked me out.
right. You take 2 or 3 people that are sensitive. One person who's a sensitive may be able to pick up on emotions or something like that. But when you put that person together with, you know, 1 or 2 other people who have that same ability, all of their abilities become so amplified, and it's really an interesting phenomenon. So that's something else that makes you wonder about exactly how much energy are we emanating for us to be able to get close to one another. If we have any kind of sensitivities or abilities, and it be so much that it actually affects the person next to us.
Well, I know that when I get charged up is the best description for it. It's like my vibrations climb, for lack of a better word,
Hmm.
but I can feel the ramp up. And when I have investigated with people who had different skill sets than me, I could do what they do
Hmm.
when that phenomenon happens. It's
Yes.
not every time. And interestingly enough, um, Blame Rohan, who is a local investigator with skills that we both know, before he ever even had a conversation with me or said anything, looked at me and said, "Oh wow, you're more powerful than I am." And I was like, "Oh, I don't think so." you know,
Right.
I don't think so. And I found that people were always trying to, or it felt like people were always trying to validate your gifts, even if they didn't know if you had them,
Hmm.
right? Because it was
Absolutely.
all new to me. But I have literally been in a home with people who could see things and hear things that I couldn't normally. And I was just right in there, wide open, even without anybody else saying anything. It was very, very, very strange. I would never have believed it if I hadn't experienced it.
Absolutely. Um, I agree. Well, I'm looking at the time, and we are just about to come up on the 3-hour mark.
We beat our record.
Yes. So I'm going to make a suggestion. I say we throw one more trivia question out there.
Cool beans.
And then call it a night.
Done deal.
Okay.
What's the question?
Okay. And I was thinking of this since we've been talking about sensitives and people with abilities and everything. Now, this is one that Google might help you, but I can't make any promises. Okay. Psychics and spirit mediums have always held a special place in world history. Which of the Bible's Old Testament leaders defied his own edict banning witches, and then went to consult an alleged witch for pre-battle advice? And I'll give you a few.
You're gonna
choices.
get that.
So yeah, so you got to think, he's from the Old Testament. He's a leader. He puts out a thing. He bans witches, psychics, anything like that. And then he goes to one himself. Solomon, David, Saul, Gideon, or Moses?
We've got a King Solomon in there.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
Any other guesses? Okay, I hear crickets.
Now we've got Moses.
Okay, well, there we go.
Or Saul.
So, yeah. Let's see.
We got Gideon.
Bueller.
I know who this is. I went to Briarwood. I'm sorry.
Right.
We had Bible classes.
Right.
Poison says David.
Okay. Okay. The actual answer is, are you ready?
Drum roll.
Should I tell him?
Yeah. Oh, Don said David too.
Okay. It was Saul.
Yep. Good job.
So we got some good guesses on that.
That was some great guess. And King says, stop Googling, Frank.
He's just mad because my Google's faster than his right now.
I know, right? He said his was running slow.
Yep, but anyway, with that, I guess we'll plan on making our way out so that we can let these people get some rest. And
well, they've got a double whammy here because we both love the paranormal and we both love to talk about it. So
absolutely,
this has been awesome.
Yes, I appreciate you coming on the show so much because I have absolutely had a blast. I
have too. I appreciate you asking me. This is my color Kool-Aid.
Right. That's I always enjoy talking to you anyway, and then you put us here. We've got a microphone where we can make everybody listen to us. It's perfect storm right here.
I tell you, we're dangerous. But I really have had a good time. I learn something new every time I talk to you, whether it's listening to your show or having a show together like this or just in our general conversation. So I've had a terrific time.
Well, me too, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in, and hope you'll tune in next Tuesday night, same time.
Wednesday night.
And yes,
tomorrow night is my show.
Yes, be sure and catch Kat's show tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. She's always got an awesome show, and I'm one of her biggest fans. So,
thank you.
So hey, I always learn something too. So, well, with that said, everyone have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Paranormalities and Ponderings with the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team, brought to you by the Paranormal King Radio Network. We hope you enjoyed the show, and will tune in again next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Please be safe as you're out there, especially if you're investigating the paranormal. Take care, have a good night, and happy huntings. Thank you again from the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team.